walk through what this idea of wellness is and what it means to everyone and how it can impact you both personally and in the professional environment, and some ways that you can kind of manage that. And I know some of you are just starting internships, like we said. And obviously we have professional development and other expectations with this program. And so, just kind of how to balance that all, and manage, your own health as well. So if we can dive into the next slide, we'll just start with some, we can start with some announcements. For anyone who has an internship through the county, we just want to remind you that you cannot start until all your paperwork is in, and that includes your work permit. So please, please, please make sure to be doing that. And if you have any questions or concerns or you're not quite sure what to do, feel free to reach out to myself or any of the other success coaches or program staff. And we're here to help, and we'll help, get you where you need to go. And then the next thing is for those who are receiving stipends, you should have seen a couple emails come across from me. But if you didn't, you need to complete an ACH form and return that to us. And you need to provide either a voided check or a letter of verification from your bank, and send that to us as well. And this will allow us to distribute your stipends through direct deposit. And you will need a bank account for this. So if you don't have a bank account, we have some resources on how to get one set up. And again, any of the program staff is happy to schedule a time to meet and kind of walk through that with you if you need. The next thing is your mentors. So please, please, please make sure that you are communicating with them. Some of them have reached out to us saying that they haven't heard from you guys. And so we just want to remind you that they are volunteering their time to meet with you. And so you really just want to be respectful of that. And if they have reached out to you and you haven't emailed them back, you should do this as soon as possible. This is a very important part of our program and something that's very important for you as a growing professional. So make sure that you're being respectful of this opportunity and taking advantage of it as well. And then we sent out a document titled How to Be a Successful Mentee. So just make sure that you are you're looking at that and using those tips when you are reaching out and communicating with your mentee, and also during your meetings. And this is just a good resource, not only now, but throughout the entire summer, to use it as a reference. And then lastly, make sure that you are completing all your deliverables. So we have the executive summary, the cooter, and then the mock interviews that have been due so far. And it's important for you to complete these in order to be eligible to receive your stipend. And it's just an important part of the program. And they're really, an essential building block to the rest of the stuff that we'll be working on this summer. So getting those done will continue to help you throughout the remainder of the program. So, and all the information on those can be found in the Google Classroom. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer or help provide feedback or assist you on any of those. So I think those are all the announcements and reminders. So I will get into the agenda next. If you want to go to the next slide. So we just spent the first 10 minutes doing announcements and reminders. And then, like I said, we'll be doing this wellness workshop, which will take up the next 35 minutes or so, 30 to 40 minutes. And then we will have youth choice workshops. So this will be an opportunity for you guys to pick whether you attend a presentation on work ethic and taking initiative, or self-presentation. And then if you want to flip to the next slide, Zoe, the self-presentation will be guided by Olivia and Sade, and then I will also be in the work ethic and taking initiative, and this session will actually be led by Andarius Taylor, who is an academic advisor here at the University of Michigan. And I've attached his full biography, which I will send out again once we go into those breakout rooms if you want to review it at his presentation, and then afterwards in the recap email as well. But he'll be leading that presentation, so we're super excited to have him. And it's just another great opportunity to hear from someone other than us. So we're looking forward to that. And without further ado, we will dive into the wellness workshop. So if you want to go. So we're going to focus on 4 different parts today. So the first thing we're going to go over kind of is, what is that idea of wellness? What does it mean? And then we'll kind of touch on stress and the different types, and the idea of hustle culture and how to kind of handle that. And then we'll go into mindfulness and this concept and practice it. And then we'll kind of close it up with tools and resources before going into the youth choice workshops. So if you want to go to the next slide, Zoe.
Sorry about that. Someone called me, y'all, and then it messed up the sharing, but here we go.
All good. Thank you. So to start off, I just kind of want to pose the question to you guys. What is well-being? So you can either throw it in the chat or come off mute. But if some of you could just kind of share what you think well-being means, it would be greatly appreciated. I don't know if anyone wants to get us started. Anyone? We could just get, go for it, sorry.
I guess what well-being means for me is that I'm doing well in all or most aspects of my life that are taking up my time or important to me. So kind of taking a holistic approach to the different parts of my life that are important and making sure that I'm doing well in those.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And I like that you talked about this idea of holistic health, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later in the presentation as well. I definitely think that's an important part of well-being. In the chat, I see mind, body, and soul fulfillment from Rhea. Absolutely. Physically and mentally, Paris said, and then Shatoria said, yep, overall state of mind. So thank you to everyone who shared. I think you all touched on, a couple important ideas, that this idea of well-being is not just how you're doing physically, but it's definitely a lot of different components of health and things that are going on in your life, including your mental well-being. And like I said, we'll kind of dive into those a little bit. But if you want to go to the next slide, Zoe. So more specifically, what is well-being? I pulled this quote, and it's a state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. And this isn't a super concrete definition, but I think in this context that's important because kind of like everyone touched on, well-being is different things to different individuals, and there are a lot of different factors that play into that and influence, your own personal quality of life and your ability to, achieve balance and personal like health and well-being. And so I think, stripping it down to something so specific takes away this concept that it's, so personal and such an individual experience. So well-being is, as I kind of said, part of our ability to achieve balance personally and professionally. And so kind of, as you start internships and you've been in the SummerWorks program and, some of you have had school or other, things going on, you may, see that these things conflict a lot. And so learning how to balance that is an important part to that idea of well-being. And then like Nur said, he mentioned this idea of holistic health. So it's more than meets the eye. So it's influenced by many different factors. So, family, work, school, relationships, money, they're just, whatever you can think of, it can definitely have an impact on your well-being. And so you definitely have to look at the big picture as well as those individual components to get an idea of how to find that balance and success for you. Um, and then ultimately, well-being is authored and defined by you. So this just means that you get to write your own definition of what happiness means, what being well means, what success and health and how you achieve them. So, I think a lot of times we get this idea with, how culture is built that, well-being and success have to be achieved through certain steps or certain actions. But ultimately it comes down to you and what's best for you. And so we really just want to emphasize that. And make sure that you understand that this is a personalized experience and it's your own journey. So then, kind of like I said, there are a lot of different dimensions of well-being. So I'm going to pass it off to Olivia to talk a little bit more in depth about those.
Hi all. So as Jordan's been talking about, holistic wellness, which incorporates all the parts of ourselves, is a really important part of our success. And so making sure that we're attending to all parts of ourselves so that everything is working smoothly is a really important part of well-being, which involves the way we care for ourselves. I also want to stress that this is a lifelong journey. So what do we mean by that? One, what works for you now may not always work for you. What worked in the past may not work in the future. So continue to reflect with yourself and think about what it is that is or isn't working for you, and take care of yourself and listen to what your whole self is telling you. And there's no point where you're just going to have solved wellness for yourself. It's always going to be something that you're working on and working toward and continually having to check in on. And that's the part that I think is both challenging and exciting about it. We can also think of wellness as a flower. I think that's like one of the really common models. So the whole flower itself is wellness, and then each of the elements of wellness is one of the petals, and you kind of see that on the left on your screen. So there are 8 dimensions of wellness that we'll be talking about today. These are emotional, financial, social, spiritual, occupational, physical, intellectual, and environmental. And we're going to talk about them more in depth. So don't worry if you didn't get all of them right there. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So when we think about physical wellness, what do we think about? If anyone wants to come off of mute or put it in the chat.
For me, physical wellness just means like being healthy and eating right and taking care of your body.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a perfect description of it. So the role that you take in maintaining your body for strength, for energy. So for this, you might ask yourself, what do you need for better sleep, nutrition, water, and physical activity? So check in on yourself on those kind of axes to achieve better physical well-being. How about emotional or mental well-being?
If you make sure to balance your work life with taking time off for yourself for your own relaxation.
Yeah, Lucas, awesome. So making sure that you're balancing work and life responsibilities for sure. I think that's absolutely true. We might think of it too as being aware and managing your feelings, being at peace with who you are, and having the tools that you need to weather life's ups and downs. So this is something where if you feel like your emotions are feeling a little bit out of control, you might look into coping strategies and emotional regulation. I know in schools we do a little of this called social emotional learning. So those strategies that you've learned a little bit of, continuing to build on those tools available to you. Environmental well-being is the impact that your environment, so home, school, the city you live in, the planet you're on has on you, and the impact that you have on the environment. You can think here about what you can change in your surroundings, in your day-to-day life, in where you're living, in order to make you feel more connected to the place and the people around you. How about financial well-being? What comes to mind for y'all?
For me, I think like just my relationship with like my own money and like saving and just like also spending money on myself, just as like a way to help my own well-being, like as a part of wellness, just spending money on myself when I want to treat myself sometimes. And also just having like savings, I would also say sometimes is part of that, at least for me. I don't know why, but I think like having savings and making sure I'm saving my money and like being financially stable is also a part of like my well-being.
Absolutely. I think financial stress is one of the biggest contributors to people's emotional dysregulation. So definitely having savings and having that kind of security can be something that brings a lot of peace. And as Kara said, also just in general, the relationship that one has with their finances and the skills you have for managing your resources. Next week, we will be getting a PD lesson on some of that in order to help you manage your resources and to help you make good choices and seek out appropriate financial opportunities. And as Kara said too, I think when you want to treat yourself and spend money on something, it can bring a lot more peace to know that you have some stability before you do that. And that way you can just really enjoy the treat. And Nara said in the chat, stability in one's finances to pursue what they need or want. Absolutely. Zoe, can I get the next slide? So now we're also thinking about occupational well-being. So the work you choose to do and how it contributes to your community and how it fulfills you. If you're feeling not great in your job, in your career, you might think about, does your work fill you with satisfaction? Does it help you get closer to your goals? And if not, what can you do to change that? Be it pursuing a different career, a different path, or thinking about how to change the tasks you do at your job in order to get closer to that. How about social well-being?
Like making sure you're taking the time to hang out with friends and family.
Absolutely, Paris, for sure. So how you connect with those friends and family and other people in your circles. How can you, or how have you developed a sense of connection, belonging, and support, and thinking about what are those things that work for you and continuing to do them? Intellectual well-being would be feeling stimulated and engaged with learning and staying open to new ideas and perspectives. What creative abilities do you possess? How can you expand your knowledge and skills out from what you already have? What are you curious about? And then pursuing those things, pursuing your creative passions, learning more about the things you're interested in are ways to increase your intellectual well-being. And then finally, what comes to mind when you think about spiritual well-being?
I think that just like doing things that like have a connection to, I guess, personally, like spiritual things, like whatever that means for you, I think it's different for everybody. And also, I think that just like faith and like church life for some people and other faiths and life in that element for different people has to do with like spiritual well-being. Like, I think it's different for every person and what their definition of like spiritual well-being is and how that looks for them.
Absolutely. Totally agree, Karis, both that it is different for different people, how they define spirituality, and that for some people that will be church oriented. And Anastasia mentioned that in the chat as well. So I think one way to kind of encompass all of that is to say how you make meaning of what happens to you and what you use to understand your place and purpose in life. And for some people, that is a really explicit connection to the church and to God. And to other people, that spiritual connection can be more grounded and more about the environment or any number of different practices, and making sure that you're tapping into and that you're aware of where you go to get your sense of purpose and meaning, and that you're checking in with that regularly will help you feel more settled. Next slide. And then all of this is to say that you know yourself better than any of us know you, and better than anyone else will know you in your life. And so you know how this information fits with your personal and professional growth. So as we're working through this presentation, and as you go into your youth choice workshops, we'd love for you to keep some questions in mind. You don't have to share them, but just be developing answers to them as we go. So I'm thinking about, how do you define well-being for yourself? What are some of the current challenges you're facing? And maybe what areas of well-being do they fit into? What has felt like a failure to you lately? And how do you typically respond to stress? And if you have answers to some of those questions, you might then start to listen for what are the skills and tools that you need to help you work on those areas. Next slide. And I pass off to Sade.
Awesome. Thanks, Olivia. So speaking of stress, which was one of Olivia's last questions for you all to kind of start reflecting on, we think it's an important topic, and we really wanted to take a minute to talk about stress, especially as a lot of you are starting your internships this week, and some of you might already have part-time jobs outside of SummerWorks. We think stress is important to chat about because the truth is the workplace can be one of the biggest stressors in many of our lives. So we just wanted to chat about stress for a second. So in addition to work itself sometimes being stressful, it's important to remember that you're bringing your whole selves to work. So anything that may be stressing you in your personal life, anything you may be dealing with with your family, or in any of your other relationships, you're bringing all of that, your whole self, to work. So we're going to talk for just a little bit about stress in the workplace. So if we can get the next slide, Zoe. So let's break down what exactly is stress first. I think when we think about stress, a lot of times we only think of negative things and about bad stress. But in reality, stress can be a combination of two things. So you have good stress, which is eustress, or bad stress, which is distress. And so we're going to talk about the difference between the two of those for a second. So we're going to do something a little bit interactive for the first part. So we're going to go through positive stressors first. If you hear a positive stress effect that resonates for you, just give us a thumbs up or clap reaction, something like that, just so that we know that this is something you resonate with. So examples of good stress or eustress include competing for a promotion at work or riding a roller coaster. Positive effects include, so here we go. Stress actually boosts your brain power, which can make it a little easier to focus and complete tasks quickly. So some people say they work best under pressure. That sounds like you. I see a thumbs up from Lucas, thumbs up Paris. Okay. Stress can increase your resiliency, meaning your ability to bounce back from a minor setback. Does that sound like anyone? Okay, got a thumbs up from Lucas. Stress can motivate you to complete something quicker. So again, this idea of working better under pressure. Rhea, Paris, we got a lot of thumbs up on that one. And then the last one, stress can positively affect your immune system. So somehow being kind of stressed out makes you feel healthier and it boosts your immune system. I see a clap from someone. Cool. All right, thanks for being interactive on that part. So let's move on to bad stress or distress, which is probably what a lot of us are a little bit more familiar with. So some examples are workplace stressors, such as a heavy workload or financial troubles when you're thinking about distress. So some of those negative effects can include over the long term, stress can be the foundation of several serious health conditions. And while your immunity can experience an increase in the short term, chronic stress can lead to weakening of your immune system. And then lastly, it can lead to an increase in symptoms of depression and anxiety, such as irritability and difficulty sleeping, or sometimes sleeping too much. It really does impact everyone differently. It's different from person to person. And long term, it can even lead to fertility issues. So I hope now you kind of see the difference between this sort of good stress and bad stress, and that you can have both. Learning to manage distress or bad stress is a key life skill. So as you can see, there's some really negative impacts, especially long-term, of dealing with stress for a long time and not accurately dealing with it. So one thing to keep in mind is that what's stressful will vary from person to person, of course. And it's important for all of us to kind of be aware of what stresses us out and find ways to kind of to deal with that stress, whatever it may be. So now we will pass it back to Jordan to chat a little bit about hustle culture.
Thank you. Could I get someone to volunteer and read this quote for me? Does anyone want to do it?
I can read it.
Thank you.
As students, there's pressure to overload on classes, extracurriculars, jobs, internships. A lot of students have the mentality that if they join 12 clubs, get 2 jobs, study abroad, and take 18 credit course loads each semester, then they will be successful in the future.
Awesome. Thank you for reading that. So if you want to flip to the next slide, Zoe. So this quote kind of touches on the idea of hustle culture. And so it's really just this concept that society glorifies being busy and overexerting ourselves and giving a lot of energy into things. And so oftentimes when we are asked how we're doing, we, commonly respond like, oh, I'm so busy, or I've got so much going on, and list all the things that we have going on. And this is just widely accepted. And so what we really want to do and encourage you to do is rethink this idea of hustle culture. So when you say, I'm so busy, it sounds kind of silly, but it's almost like a status symbol, it really ties our worth to how much we're doing, and that this idea of busyness is some sort of badge of honor. And it really then emphasizes this idea that success can only be achieved through putting in lots of work and putting in long hours. And, like we talked about previously with that idea of wellness, this is, so different for everyone, and success is not the same across the board. And so, as a society, creating this idea that it can only be achieved this way really can contribute to a more negative impact. So before I jump into some of these examples, does anyone have any immediate thoughts come to mind on how busyness has impacted their well-being, or maybe others that they know, some examples? And you can throw it in the chat or come off mute if you want to share. I know that when I get busy and buy into this idea of hustle culture, I get really unorganized. That's kind of what happens to me. And so then it becomes stress, which a bad form of stress for me, unfortunately, kind of like we talked about, that distress, and just makes me really anxious and tired instead of helping me be productive and get things done. So I don't know if anyone else wants to share an example.
I can share. I definitely would say when I get busy and have a bunch of stuff to do, I definitely had an issue with this. I would say last semester and buying into hustle culture, because I decided to take 17 credits last semester for some reason. And I was super stressed out for the entire second half of second semester. and I had a lot of stuff to do. And so I was super busy that I didn't really have any time to take time for myself and just like relax, like I did in my first semester, because I had taken a lot, like less credits. I had taken like 14 or 13 or something like that. So I was like really tired a lot of the time because I would be staying up until like 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning and then waking up for class the next day. So it started to like affect, I guess, my own like well-being and like my health, because then I would be so busy that I would be like, I wouldn't eat like 3 times a day, and then I would be just up all night and then wake up early or like wake up late the next day just so I could catch up on some sleep. So it was like a big, I guess, impact on like my own well-being. And I think that I just kind of was like, oh, let me take all these credits and then I don't have to do as much next semester, or this is like gonna be good for, I guess, getting like closer to completing my degree and everything like that. So I just think that it was not as like worth it as I thought it would be at the time. It definitely had more negative impacts than positive. And I definitely wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Karis, and walking us through your experience. And I think you just touched on a lot of great things that it does impact so many different parts of your life, as you kind of showed for us. Your sleeping habits, your eating habits. You felt stressed, anxious, and that you also kind of found those justifications, right? Which is again that kind of reinforcement we get to be busy. You have this idea that is kind of reinforced by society. So I appreciate you sharing and really kind of, showcasing for us just one example of how stress can impact our lives in so many ways. And we see in the chat too, Anastasia says that it makes her anxiety flare up and she gets stressed so she doesn't sleep. So yeah, it sounds like sleep is a big one for a lot of us. But some, just some other examples of how it can impact our well-being. We see burnout, which is, just not having the energy to get things that you've done, and not only the things that need to get done, but all those other extra things that kind of build up on our list. And when you're busy, you have a lot of things going on, and so when you build those up and then you experience this burnout, it's really hard to be able to stick to those commitments that you've made in those timelines. And then we see imposter syndrome. And if you haven't heard of this before, imposter syndrome is the idea that you feel like you don't belong, you might feel subpar, or that everyone around you is somehow better or smarter. So it's really just this feeling of not fitting in, that you're kind of faking it, that you're really not achieving what you have. And obviously this is 100% the opposite of what we want to feel like, because when we get so busy, you guys are achieving so much, and so to feel that way when you're working on so many things can be not only really frustrating and bad for your mental health, but just again kind of diminishes all the awesome things that you are doing. And then, hustle culture also feeds into this, feeling of guilt or anxiety when we are unproductive. So, if we aren't, doing a million things, if, we aren't doing as much as someone around us, we start to get these feelings like we are, not doing enough, that guilt, that anxiety that builds up like, okay, I need to be doing the same as people because they're busier than me. And, it's already so hard to manage what we've got going on. So when you have not only these feelings of guilt and anxiety, but then any actions that accompany it, whether that's adding more or, stressing out about what you're working on more, it can really just, again, contribute to, poor well-being. And we really don't want that. So I really encourage you to just kind of reevaluate that idea of hustle culture, and take the time to learn, what is best for you, and how you can be successful, and not what is deemed successful by society based on how busy you are. And I think that really helps, in that journey of achieving overall well-being. And it's just, one of the many components. So I will pass it off to Dallas next to talk a little bit about how social media and technology plays in our well-being.
Oh, excuse me. All righty. So we all know what social media is, right? And to a degree, we all know what it does and or doesn't do. Um, a lot of people use it for different manners, different ways, different purposes, stuff like that. But in the grand scheme of it all, social media kind of makes us feel as if we're lacking, right? Sometimes it makes us feel as if we're less than. We take a look at our friends and our family, and folks are going on vacations and all of these birthday parties and graduation setups and things like that. It's, a situation where it seems as if we're comparing ourselves because, as it was said earlier, we know ourselves better than any and everyone else. But comparing that to what we see, right? That outward appearance. Um, it could even be somebody within this group, right? Getting a great internship. And, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good one. I should have da 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 da. But we don't really know what all that looks like underneath, right? Um, it can certainly take a toll. So with social media and technology, it allows us to communicate with our loved ones and connect with new people, right? Express shared interests, learn about topics, and raise awareness. I definitely have my purpose of using social media and technology. And sometimes, yes, it is to do these situations that I just described. But that negative side of it all, it promotes a feeling of inadequacy, as it says on the little cell phone there, feeling of missing out. Funny thing about this, when I was younger, speaking of the hustle culture, I didn't take naps, right? I've never been much of a sleeper. Just before, I guess, this term hustle culture was even coined, I've never been much of a sleeper. Even when I didn't have anything to do and I wasn't busy, I've just always been a night owl. But one reason why I never took naps is because I always felt like something was going to happen when I was asleep. Not necessarily to me, but like one of my friends would call and, oh man, you got to come in, whoop de whoop. And I can't answer the phone if I'm asleep. So it's just weird to see now that these two topics back to back are kind of some things that I may have felt, or maybe it's even this hybrid feeling that I've just created. I don't know. But it's also a feeling of isolation, depression, anxiety, right? The fear of missing out, if I could go back on that, it's when we look at things and it feels as if it's, really fun. The example that best suits that could be like a vacation. You see people doing water activities or going to theme parks and things like that, right? And as much as we tell ourselves, hey, okay, good for them, so on and so forth, over a undisclosed or just some period of time, it really kind of feels like it starts to impact us, right? This world that we're in, it's really, 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 really connected digitally. I gave it so much energy because I don't know if you all are, I guess, able to recognize or able to pinpoint when, texting and social media really started to come out. I know I was probably in high school, maybe early college. So that's kind of like in the beginning stages of some of your lives. But it's just absolutely amazing how much it's grown since then. Absolutely amazing. Um, it has a tendency of making us feel lonely sometimes, right? But on the flip side, especially during this time, it's definitely a way that we can feel connected also. Um, being connected, though, can also make us feel a little bit tired. All of this swiping and all of this Googling and oh, let me put it on Facebook. Let me check my comments. Let me jump on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all of that. I know y'all get tired of doing these dances, but that's another conversation. So social media isn't all bad, though. You can communicate, as we kind of been talking about. This has especially been important 2020, right? First 6 months of 2021. Um, Sometimes we may think of people who we haven't seen in a while. It might be somebody we talk to every day, but Facebook and all of these other platforms make it really, really convenient to reach out to check on people, to see how folks are doing, whether they're safe or not, right? It's been quite the good situation, we'll say. You can even connect with new people and find communities regardless of its geographical distance or location, right? Over common interests. I've jumped in a couple of Facebook groups and I've actually benefit from them. May it be something monetary or new friendships, new partnerships, new opportunities. It's been good. It's been good. As we're speaking about the good, of course. But social media definitely provides you with opportunities to learn about a variety of topics that you may be interested in. May I have the next slide, please? Okay, so as we kind of freeze it here, I'd hope somebody will come and talk to me. But can you tell me what mindfulness is?
I think
I was told. Oh, sorry. Go.
Thank you. I think mindfulness is like being aware of like not only yourself but the people around you and like how you're feeling and how other people may be feeling.
I like that. So wait, before you go, what does it mean to you?
I think oh my gosh, mindfulness to me is like being in touch with like my own feelings, like where I am mentally and like being self-aware basically at where I am at a moment. Like if I'm stressed out, I have the tendency to like get very deeply like immersed into whatever I'm doing. And I think being like mindful is like being aware that like you need to take a step back and take a break and then come back to it. I think that is like what mindfulness is to me.
That's awesome. I like that. I don't know who that was speaking, who may have come on the mic at the same time, but can you tell me what mindfulness means to you? I'm not sure who it was. It was a young man, I believe. When I asked what mindfulness meant, can you come back? All right, whichever. We'll move on, I guess. Oh yeah, okay, Lucas. Well, you can just put it in the chat down there, and we'll make sure we read it, get to it. I'm pretty sure you already know. That was a great answer, though. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so mindfulness, it's a radical practice where instead of turning away, we actually turn toward our difficult emotions and hold them with compassion. So very much so being aware of our feelings and our thoughts and what's going on with our lives. So that answer was spot on, right? It was spot on. Mindfulness is, right, a skill that we learn to develop over time by determining what works for ourselves. Not even without. For those of you who may not have had the full picture or the full idea of what mindfulness meant, as we talk about what it is, I'm pretty sure that one could resonate with some of us. If I didn't know the definition or if I didn't just read it aloud, paying attention to myself or determining what works best for ourselves, that's something that I've currently been practicing, right? There's been a lot of situations where, yes, I'm pulled in every direction for everyone, but I haven't really had a chance to consider how Dallas is doing, what Dallas has going on. And it's been quite the different experience, I can tell you that much. But mindfulness is taking the time to pause and breathe amidst, I almost couldn't say it, the busyness we talked about, right? Non-judgmental awareness and reflection on our feelings, meaning we allow ourselves to be honest with how we feel and we accept those feelings without passing judgment on. So for example, not feeling bad or guilty about being tired or burnt out. A lot of people would just kind of sum that up as it is what it is, right? It's accepting. That phrase there, it can be kind of twisted and bent, but I feel like you guys know where I'm going with this. But let's see. What else comes to mind when you all hear mindfulness?
Maybe some folks we haven't heard from yet tonight. Don't make your SummerWorks colleagues do all the work.
I see self-care from Anastasia.
For me, I remember like doing these exercises called mindfulness in middle school. That was kind of like self-reflection and checking in.
All right, Ray, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Can we maybe get one more? Can I go 3 in a row?
I guess what comes to mind for me is not being afraid to treat yourself. I think this goes in with the hustle culture as well, in terms of, you know, not to use the same word in the definition, but be mindful of who you are and what you need. And, you know, if you feel like you need a break or you want something and it's not necessarily going to harm you, then you should go after it to make yourself as a whole feel better.
Man, Noor, thank you so much. I got 3. I feel satisfied. So as we kind of take a dive into that, I'm gonna pass it back to Joy because she's the expert on the topic. So.
Awesome, thank you. So kind of then thinking about mindfulness in the context of stress, we see this, that our thoughts often impact how much stress we feel, and then that stress then in turn impacts our actions, or can be kind of then seen through our actions. And so that's really why it's just important to, you know, try and practice mindfulness and, you know, adapt it and incorporate it into your everyday life. Because it really can help, you know, not only personally with your stress, but then how you interact with others, and, you know, just that workplace environment. So some things that mindfulness can help with. So like I said, stress, and really just reframing it. So kind of like Sade touched on, we have that idea of good stress and bad stress, which is, you know, eustress and distress. So really being able to look at it and, you know, say, okay, what kind of stress is this for me, and how I'm going to manage it. And mindfulness also taps into this idea of self-awareness. So being able to evaluate yourself and where you're at, and just being more cognizant overall of your emotions and your state of well-being, and just kind of where you're at as a whole. And that can really then help as you take those actions to manage your stress and practice mindfulness. And then it can also help with accepting control. So I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I get stressed, it can just feel really hard to manage things. You can feel a lack of control. And so when you practice that mindfulness, it really just helps calm your emotions and help you think logically through everything, and really gain that sense of composure and control back that you might have felt, you know, slipping earlier. And then again, it just really helps with gaining perspective. So this, you know, concept of being able to step back and look at everything kind of individually and as a whole, you know, having those different perspectives and being able to look at it in different ways can then help, you know, adapt and change your approach and how you handle the situation and the stress and what techniques you might use, like for mindfulness. So it's definitely important. And then one analogy that I kind of learned that I wanted to share is this idea of the glass ball analogy. And so it's just that we often feel like when we're juggling a lot of things, and quite literally in this analogy, you visualize yourself juggling, they all feel like glass balls. So it feels like if we drop something, it's going to shatter and it's just going to be a big, huge mess. But when you practice mindfulness, it can help you really reframe and recognize that some of those balls that you're juggling are actually just rubber and not glass. And so they might not hold as much power or stress as you originally thought. And so if you drop them, they're going to be okay and they'll actually come right back. And so, you know, when you reframe those things and use something or a technique like that and kind of look at it in that context, it can really just, again, help with mindfulness and stress. So if I can get the next slide. So with mindfulness comes this idea of self-care, and a number of you have touched on that. And so we just want to kind of talk about how, you know, self-care is important. It's a necessity, but it's not always pretty. I think a lot of times we have these ideas that self-care is, you know, just a face mask and a good snack and a movie. And while it definitely can be that in some instances, I know I do that sometimes myself, that's not all there is to self-care. You know, there's definitely, like we said, this idea of, you know, practicing self-awareness and mindfulness and looking at your stress and, you know, really getting in there and putting in that work, to, you know, change and, you know, work on being more mindful, alleviating that stress, and, you know, adapting it in your life. And then we also, just again, you know, be on the lookout for burnout. It's definitely something that can sneak up on you and you don't even realize it's happening. So instead of looking at, you know, what you may consider unproductive, maybe recognize it as a form of burnout, or exhaustion that you might be feeling, and take the opportunity to, you know, help yourself and practice that self-care. Again, just really define your own balance and set your own goals. And this will help you, and don't, you know, measure against others, or, you know, society standards. And then really trust yourself and your energy. So only you know what is best for you, and no one else can tell you that. So, you know, it might feel strange at first when you start these practices, but really just trust that you know what's best for yourself and you know where you're at and what your energy is. And then lastly, a great tip that I use all the time is doing a body scan of your schedule. So this is really just taking that step back again to practice mindfulness, doing a full kind of overview and look at everything that's going on in your day, and then kind of figuring out how you can adapt it and manage it and, you know, navigate it in a way that's best for you and make sure that you're successful. So if we can get the next slide. And we have youth choice workshops. So I'm not going to walk us through this one, but we'll send it out in the slides, and Raya kind of talked on it. But one example of a mindful exercise that you can practice anywhere is just deep breathing. And so what this graphic shows is you inhale as the image grows, and then exhale until it completely collapses. And this really just helps regulate your breathing. And when you're doing something like this, you're focused on your breathing, you're focused on yourself, and it really just helps bring you to the present, and help you be mindful of yourself and your surroundings. So you can look these up online. Like I said, we'll send these slides out so you'll have this as well, but definitely try something like that. And then I will pass it off to Sade to talk about other ways that we can practice mindfulness.
Yeah, so I'll go over these briefly. I know we're running low on time here, but outside of just kind of breathing exercises like that, other things you can do are go for a walk and try to be really in tune with your surroundings. You can also meditate, and that can be short or long, depending on how you're feeling. Stretching your body is also good. So, you know, just getting up, stretching it out, shaking it out. And then journaling or writing are also always good options. There's also apps you can use. So Calm is a really good meditation and mindfulness app. Insight Timer is also really great for meditation and just overall time management. And then Headspace is a really awesome one. I use this one. And it's also really great for meditation and mindfulness. Headspace is a really popular one, along with Calm. So try to check some of those out. I will pass it over to Olivia.
So I think our big takeaway here is for managing stress management while working from home. And the most important thing I think you can do if you are combining your living space and your workspace is to claim a space that is solely for work. It'll help you set your routine and for your body and your mind, and keep a physical and mental separation between work and home, which is a thing that can really like bleed into everything.